He's a biology emeritus. And what he does on a regular day would be going out there on the field and actually collect flies, real flies. And he would also gather data from publications, and he would have a collection of a lot of the data on flies. But I titled it Collecting Bugs because this is what I feel like. I was implementing a system for him and doing most of the implementation using Access 2000 to give him a system that could populate and disseminate a bug's life story electronically, which means that you want to figure out when a bug was collected and who the collector was and who the author was, which means who actually discovered the bug. And I called it a collecting bugs because my project seemed like I've been looking at a lot of bugs through implementation. I've been getting a lot of Microsoft bugs, which I had to go online and search for, and whether it be DAO or ADO, there's bugs everywhere. And the next project definition is Master does no work, which means that Dr. Masteler, before the system that I created for him, he had a system beforehand. How I got this job was a year ago. My roommate was working as a tech guy, as a support group at a help desk down at Hammermill. And what happened there was Masteler had a problem with his little database that he had. So he approached my roommate. He didn't have a solution, so he came to me, and I saw his database, and it was horrific. It wasn't really just one table. I would have actually preferred one table, but it was like 5, 7 different tables, but it had some confusion everywhere. So the data model was terrible. And what Masteler had to do, because he didn't have a good database application, he actually had to type up every single collection that he ever made and all the data that he gathered. So when he would publish biology publications that deals with flies, what he would do is actually type it up on a report. It was close to about 200 pages worth of data, just pure data that he typed up himself. And a lot of the data that he did, he had to format it himself using a word processor and whatnot. And so the data that he collected, after he prints them out, he has to check them because he doesn't have a database to check for integrity. So the scope of the project, since I've been working on this for like about a year, but very on and off, very briefly here and there, what I did prior to this internship was the data inputs. So most of the left side was already done, basically. But the problem entering to this internship was that he changed the data design on me at the last minute, which means that instead of just changing a little thing, he changed this side became a composite key. But later on, when I show you the relationships, it doesn't work that way originally. So what I had to do was, instead of checking for integrity using data model, I had to do it through code. And since I was the implementer, I was stuck with a lot of the bugs that Microsoft provides with the packages. And so the scope of the project was that I had to fix up the data inputs, get the new way to put in the data. And also the data integrity was the biggest issue for us, was that he doesn't publish anything that provides inaccurate data. So accuracy was #1. So the whole purpose for me, for the user, was that instead of user actually thinking that they're driving, I'm actually driving for them. So I set up all the forms and the way the data flowed by what I wanted them to do, not what they could do for me. And the third and fourth one was a search engine and reporting system. And a search engine and reporting system was huge because the customers that he has are other professors and other biologists, and there's other field workers that collect flies and wants to see, who did this and who did what. So search engine and reporting system will really help them in disseminating the actual database, and will be distributed through CD-ROM, and will be on. He's doing another project doing website development, so he will be using our database to do that. Surviving the bug raid. This is basically the goals that I had, and some of the stuff that I learned was generation planning. There was 4 different scopes that I did, and I actually used generation planning, which means that I made each group as one generation, So I would not go to the next generation until that thing was totally fixed, tested, debugged, and then go on to the next stage. But the thing was, I got on this internship about a month and a week ago. So which means that generation planning was speedied generation planning, which means I had to do as much as I can at a short period of time. Maybe 2 days, I would spend about 40 hours or 50 hours, 40 hours without sleeping, and then basically finish that, and then spend another week later on doing the next plan. Some of the stuff that I had to follow was using consistent naming scheme and reuse of code, queries, and forms. And the last bullet, listen to the users but don't hear, which means Dr. Mastler, he's a biology professor. He doesn't know anything about data modeling or how the data flows and stuff like that. And I listened to him from the beginning, and listening to him and how the data flowed, and that was a huge mistake because he would change the data design on me all the time, but he doesn't realize that that affects about 25 forms, 40 forms, and like codes in 100 pages. And so this is a relationship that I came up with after I decided not to listen to him. Beforehand, when he was talking to me, the species ID and site ID was the composite key. That would uniquely identify the collection. And you would have session, which means when it was collected, how many was collected, whether it was female, male, how many was immature, or whatever. Now, this system had to change, and collection, species ID, site ID, and collection of collectors, plus and deposits and publication had to be combined as a composite key. But using Access, it was hard to do that in a relational database. So what I had to do was do that through code. So this is basically what a collection database looks like. You got a specimen, you got a site, you get to where you got the collected species. The site and publication, whether if he didn't do it himself, he got it from a different publication. And session details, meaning how many he collected. Now this is a consistent form for every single thing that you have. You have forms for collectors, you have authors and stuff like that. On top you have the main menu keys, and you can tell that you don't have a minimize or maximize or anything like that because I'm driving you. So I don't want anybody to have any bug that's not expected. And so you have also quick searches so that you could definitely look for it. Now if you click on edit or add, you'll come up to this screen. This is a screen, we'll make it very user-friendly. It's go by step by step. So it will drive you to enter all the data correctly, and the data integrity issue will be taken care of. Now this is really hard because this form took about maybe about 15 or 16 pages worth of code, just to check for data integrity, checking for whether the composite key, which is those 4, were virtual composite keys, were unique. So if you enter a specimen, go to the next site. These are relatively easy. And here's another example of what he did to me, like periodically, which he doesn't believe is a lot of work. A publication, he just changed that up, and he made it into 3 fields. But that was already done with a lot of reports already and a lot of forms. So I had to